I just think maybe, you might not want to, but I think you should air it now where it is at now.
Yeah, I do.
I think you should go over there, we'll all go over there collectively and we just air it.
Hey,
I know it's fucked, Josh, but let's iron this out.
You're in the group. Oh, fucking hell. This is going to go off here now, I can see it. I think we all know what we're going to speak about.
What? I came over and asked you about Naomi, that was it. I said, you know, you seem
Right,
really loved up.
so wait there.
It's really nice to see you loved up. I was just having a general chat with you.
What you just said then, you went, so what happened with you and Naomi last night? That's what you said. You was like, so has Naomi touched your cock yet? So you didn't. So you didn't say that.
When did I say that?
You said, so has Naomi not touched your dick yet like I did? Are you sure?
I didn't say that at all.
Did you say that or not?
No, I
Did
didn't
you say that or not?
I did not.
Did you say that or not? And you went, well, I've been watching you, so it don't look like it.
I didn't say I've been watching you. Fuck, as if I... Hang on a minute, I've got my own business to deal with. Why the fuck would I watch you?
Why is it you get so much shit? Like, why is it you get so much shit?
I don't know.
Because from the outside in, right?
Fuck off.
Hang on a minute, Jess, no?
I don't quite know what's gone on, but obviously she said something that she shouldn't have done, and I want to know what's gone on because I don't know what's gone on.
Right, hey, welcome. So, hi, I'm Mika, and I'm gonna start you off with a little bit of context, okay? So, that was a scene from season 1 of Love Island UK. A little while back, in a depression-fueled moment, I decided to go back and watch the show from the start. It raised so many alarm bells in my head as I was watching it that I needed to make this video to unpack it. Before I get ahead of myself and explain, I'm just gonna give you a little bit of an overview of how the show works. Basically, a bunch of young, conventionally attractive singles from the UK are sent to a villa. It's usually in Majorca, Spain, and they spend the summer looking for love. So they couple up upon entering the villa, and as the show goes on, they're given opportunities to recouple with new people, new bombshells enter the villa. That's just a phrase that means new hot people to cause drama. This results in like chaos, excitement, public humiliation.
Fuck you, you basic Made in Chelsea fucking reject bitch!
And if at any point a contestant finds themselves without a partner or single, they risk being dumped from the island. This is done through like a public vote or between themselves or other contestants. For around 6 to 8 weeks in the summer, every year, this show runs every single day in near real time, so maybe 24 to 48 hours behind the villa, with the exception of Saturday nights where we get the recap of the week's show, unseen bits. And there are a lot more elements to the show, but let's be clear, this is not a Love Island recap video, okay? I'll give you more context if it becomes necessary, but that's sort of what you need right now. So back to the scene you just watched. More recent viewers might be surprised to learn that that was like pretty common practice from like the earlier seasons back in like 2015, 2016. And there's a lot going on there. Like there's like some blatant misogyny, a little bit of gaslighting, a little bit of male ego, just sort of the hallmarks of reality TV, right? But the thing that I'm interested in and the thing that we're here to talk about today is the effects of alcohol. I want to think about what would have happened, would it have happened in the first place if the contestants had been sober? But also, without the liquid courage, like what's the point of filming the show? Where's the mess? Where's the drama? Where's the chaos that we tune in for? Does it work if the contestants aren't at least a little bit buzzed? And then I think, like, is that fair? Did that scenario feel particularly safe to you? You know, like a bunch of angry, intoxicated dudes aggressively running up on like some also intoxicated and slightly confused women in like an isolated space where they don't have like access to the outside world. The producers of the show didn't seem to think so, because after a couple of seasons they enforced a pretty strict drinking limit, usually about 2 drinks per day, because these kind of incidents kept happening. That generally did lead to the show being very much restructured, so that kind of stuff doesn't really happen in the newer iterations. There's still like drama and mess and chaos and stuff, but it's a lot more like manufactured and controlled, and it's actually something that audiences have complained about recently. So what's the deal with getting drunk on TV, right? Like, does it work better for the audiences? At what point is it not worth the risk, and when are we willing to make exceptions? What are the effects, the ethical implications, the long-term ramification? My point is, I want to get into it, and because I'm autistic, I did like a stupid amount of research into the history of alcohol in our society and watched around 10 seasons of reality dating shows in the past month in order to prepare. So now, in true reality dating TV show fashion, I'm gonna get drunk and also tell you some of the stuff I learned. So when I started this project, I knew like way too much about reality dating shows, and I'm big enough to admit that. And while I also had a growing interest in sort of like societal relationships with alcohol, it was mostly based on like personal experience, assumptions, a little bit of childhood trauma, but I needed to do some research. Edward Slingerland's book, Drunk: How We Sipped, Danced, and Stumbled Our Way to Civilization, was a fundamental point of research for this project, and it also just reframed so much of my outlook on alcohol. It's a very insightful deep dive into like the roots of civilization and how intoxication is sort of intrinsically linked in our development as a species, but it also breaks down the basic notion of why. Why do we get drunk in the first place? Why have our bodies not evolved past the desire for intoxication regardless of the slew of negative consequences? Why is it so ingrained in our society? To understand that, we first need to brush up a little bit on our understanding of evolution and how intoxication fits into that. Time for my whiteboard. I bought a whiteboard for this. I just thought you might, you know. Anyways, so it's not an unpopular opinion that our ongoing desire for intoxication and getting drunk is sort of the result of an evolutionary mistake, which is basically something that should have been phased out by now but hasn't for some reason. And there are two types of evolutionary mistakes it's often thought to be. Sorry. Oh no, it's gonna be reversed. Hangover versus hijack. So, let's talk hangover first. This is where we are plagued by behaviors and drivers that were once adoptive but are no longer. The example that Slingerland uses is junk food. Back in the day, as hunters and gatherers, we were inclined to like sugary, fatty foods because of the risk of starvation and, you know, the constant threat of food scarcity. However, now you can literally... Okay, you can tell that I was watching a lot of specifically British reality shows when I wrote this, because I wrote, you can literally hop round to the shops. You can literally go to the store and grab whatever candy or processed foods, like guilty pleasures you want, as long as like you have the money for it. So this inclination has become more harmful and destructive than it was ever intended to be. Hijack, however, is where we figured out an illicit way to tap into a pleasure system originally designed to reward other more adaptive behaviors. An example that Slingerland uses here is masturbation, right? Because originally, orgasms were meant to be a reward for procreating and reproducing. However, we're kind of sneaky, and so we figured out that you can get the reward part without the procreating part. Hence, hijack. So let's consider alcohol. And there are theories for both categories. Maybe there was a time when our desire for alcohol was adaptive, but in modern society, it's become more maladaptive. Hangover. Or maybe it's a design flaw. The reward chemicals we're supposed to experience for adaptive behaviors just so happen to be triggered by ethanol, which is the active ingredient in alcohol. But also maybe it's a little bit more complicated than that. To consider alcohol as an evolutionary mistake, we'd be assuming that it's an unmitigated vice. A vice is a habitual practice that gives fleeting pleasure, but is ultimately harmful to oneself or others, or at best a waste of time. The problem is, even though I could totally list a bunch of ways that alcohol is dangerous and harmful, I can't in good conscience ignore the pros on the pros and cons list that we're developing here. Surely there's a reason that alcohol is still so widespread in our societies, in our communities, in our social way of life. If it's just like a dangerous waste of time, like why the fuck would we still be doing it so much? How did it even get to be so significant in like the first place? And so we're back to the question of why do we drink? Real quick, before I get into this next section, I want to make a quick note here. While I'm going to unpack some of the benefits and useful roles of alcohol in this video, I also recognize the risk of promoting alcohol use without taking into consideration like the negative consequences. My goal here is not to urge or encourage anybody to drink more at all. I just want to lay down the facts so that we can look at the big picture. If you or anybody you know struggles with addiction, please seek help and consider whether or not this video is like helpful to you at this time. I won't be offended if you click off here, and if you want to learn more about this topic, then amazing. Please stick around. Okay, right, for those of you who are still here, let's get into the case for intoxication. Let's talk about niche. I'm gonna say real quick, in the audiobook of, like, Slingerland's audiobook, the person who reads the book says niche, and it's totally possible that that's the correct way to say this word, but I don't think I'm gonna remember to say it like that the whole way through, so I'm gonna say niche because that's how I say the word, and I don't trust my tipsy little brain to get that right in like 10 minutes. Humans are powerful in groups precisely because we are weak as individuals, pathetically eager to connect with one another and utterly dependent on the group for survival. Right. In order to understand a species' evolutionary features, you have to first understand the ecological niche within which they exist. In ecology, the term niche describes the role an organism plays in a community. A species' niche encompasses both the physical and environmental conditions it requires, like temperature or terrain, and interactions it has with other species, like predation or competition. An example is like the Mexican cave tetrafish, which spend their entire lives in pitch black caves, and so they've adapted to their ecological niche. By losing their eyes and becoming a pale white color, because they don't need either color or eyes to exist in this pitch black cave. Humans have a pretty extreme and unusual ecological niche, and so we've adapted in 3 significant ways. In order to survive as a species, we have become the 3 C's: creative, cultural, and communal. These are very unique adaptations, and they're exclusive to us. Our journey to achieving them has been largely supplemented and supported by getting drunk.
Can you tell me?
You can. Humans have gotten to where we are today as a direct result of our ability to be creative, coming up with new and innovative ways to develop, farm, build, and grow. Cultural, accumulating and building upon advancements passed down to us through culture and preserved shared belief systems. And communal. You can't really see that, but communal, working collectively towards a shared common goal of survival and success. As we get older, we are assimilated and taught to meet these evolutionary expectations. It's why humans have such a long developmental period and often need parenting until after the age of 18. We only really reach full cognitive function around our mid-20s. Compare that to a chicken, which basically pops out of an egg ready to go and with very little development to learn everything they will ever need. Obviously, it's like super convenient that they don't need as much support and parental care past the 2-week mark, but consider the life achievements of your average chicken and your average human, and there's like a massive disparity there. Our slow development actually helps significantly when it comes to the 3 C's. As children, we're super open-minded and flexible in our beliefs, we're playful and creative, we're trusting to new people and new information. This is a direct result of our prefrontal cortex being inactive as it continues to develop well into adulthood. I have to wipe and pet at the same time. I can't stop or he'll get mad. Actually, maybe I could use the back of the board, but I'm just gonna wipe it anyways. Sorry, Moosh. I'm gonna do this quick, okay? Hang on, just give me a second. Okay, right. So, let's talk PFC. The prefrontal cortex has a very important job in adulthood. It's our center for cognitive control and goal-directed behavior. Essentially, it has a lot to do with our critical thinking, decision-making, control of inhibitions. It also tells our body how to do a lot of the things that we do automatically, like walking, movement, tying your shoes. It's why children are like always falling over themselves and saying shit that they probably shouldn't say, or getting easily distracted, or switching tasks without warning.
And let me see what you have! No! Oh my god, why does he have
With no PFC in control, or keeping us in line, we just become very silly animals, but oftentimes, like, more entertaining, more interesting, more intuitive. That being said, kids obviously don't really get very much done. Slingerland actually says, truth be told, as fun and endearing as they are, children are completely useless. If they were in charge of things, we'd be doomed. And he's not wrong. Like, the solution here isn't to let a bunch of kids run the show, but rather to find a way to enter a childlike mind space. Ideally, we'd be able to, temporarily, as adults, turn off the PFC and let the creative, fun, trusting, social part of our brain run free, much like that of a child, and then go back to being regulated adults capable of making complex decisions and retaining information. And wouldn't you know it, alcohol does exactly that. Essentially, intoxication helps us with the demands of our ecological niche, making it easier for us to be creative, coexist in close quarters with others, keep our spirits in collective undertaking, and be more open to connecting and learning from others. Okay. So, by now, you might be thinking, hey Nika, that's cool and all, but like I really thought you were gonna talk about like reality dating shows, and so far you've been talking about like evolutionary mistakes and like some sciencey stuff. To which I say, heard, but also like hold on a sec. I'm building a case here, and if we really want to be able to break down the intricacies at play here when these reality TV shows funnel people with booze, we need to understand what the booze is actually doing and why it matters. Also, quite frankly, I had to do like a lot of reading and research to make this make sense, and I kind of want you guys to like hear all my research and like be proud of me. So chill out, okay? I'm getting somewhere, and I don't want to be rushed, and yeah. Okay, moving on.
I'm good. I mean, like, same thing mentally, I'm good. Like, you know what I mean? Is that like, I'm not saying is that like I want you to be a parent. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not telling you.
I don't want to be your parent.
Let's talk drunk dating. Now that we understand how humans work, we have a motivation to drink. It's been essentially vital to our development and survival as communal animals. There are other methods of reducing prefrontal cortex activity. Oh no, prefrontal cortex activity. I'm gonna say PFC from here on out because I think that's just gonna get sloppy. There are other methods to reduce PFC, control or activity, but they tend to involve like getting zapped in the forehead or like putting sharp rods in your cheeks or like severe brain damage. And like having a drink is just easier and quicker, and also just generally very temporary. It also just generally goes hand in hand with social activities, bonding, communal gatherings. Think of a wedding. Two families coming together to celebrate a union. Often a lot of these people haven't even met before. By the end of the day, people are doing the cha-cha slide in unison. They're embracing, they're laughing together, they're crying together, they're sharing baby stories. And yes, it's the endorphins of a beautiful event, but also it's the booze. Like, there's a reason why there are open bars at weddings. But it's not all good times and partying, right?
I cannot do this.
There are a lot of negative effects to shutting off the part of your brain that is responsible for weighing up the risks and managing your motor skills, and also determining what is and what is not safe. Now, consider how that might affect romantic and sexually charged encounters. And things get a little bit dicey. So you may already suspect that alcohol increases confidence, but I'm more interested in its effects on attraction. Aristotle once said, "A man in his cups may even be induced to kiss persons whom, because of their appearance or age, nobody at all would kiss when sober." And yeah, it checks out, okay? Like, there's a tendency to find somebody more attractive after a drink. I'm sure some people are familiar with the experience of spending all night all over somebody only to wake up the next day and realize in the harsh light the morning after that they're not all that. But not only do we find other people hotter when drunk, it seems that we actually are hotter when drunk. A photographer called Marcus Alberti conducted an experiment called the Wine Project, in which he photographed people at varying levels of intoxication, starting from completely sober, usually after like a long day of work, all the way to about 3 glasses deep. And the people become more confident, more aloof, more smiley, and like relaxed by the third photo. Not only this, but studies show that drunk people will also rate themselves as more attractive, and this also increases with alcohol intake. Alcohol also just like gives you a dopamine hit that makes you feel good and want more. And Slingerland notes that enhanced sexual desire, distorted social perception, and cognitive myopia can easily congeal into a poisonous cocktail, driving seriously bad behavior ranging from poor sexual decisions to sexual harassment and abuse. Okay, so this feels like a great time for a trigger warning. I initially wanted to have a trigger warning where like there's a timestamp that you can skip to if you don't want to hear about like sexual assault and abuse and violence. However, as I was writing this, I realized that unfortunately it's kind of a running theme and it comes up a lot, like way more than I wish it did. So much like my earlier statement about alcohol intake, I would say at this point, if that's just not something you can like really get into, no hard feelings. If you want to click out, step out, like I get that. Let's talk about Are You the One for a second. I had never heard about Are You the One until well into this project, and I watched one season of it. Basically, in 2019, the MTV show Are You the One released a special season called Come One and Come All, in which contestants identified as sexually fluid. It was basically a bi season. They said sexually fluid. There's a lot of discourse about that. I won't get into it. And this was really interesting because it basically meant that everybody in the house was a potential partner for everybody else. So there were no limitations. Well, I love to discuss how messy this season was and the ways that, in my opinion, it reinforces the messy, greedy, selfish bisexual stereotype. I can't get into that right now. That could be its own entire video. I'm gonna stay on task. I can't, there's no time, okay? Full disclosure, I've only watched this season. This is the only season of Are You, the one I watched. I think it's like season 8. And it's partially because it was the only one that was on Crave, and also because I only watched it because it was queer. So, also I just kind of think the show premise is like super dumb. That being said, even as a standalone season, I was like blown away by how influenced contestant behavior was by alcohol and drinking. That's the same thing. So for context, the premise of the show is that every contestant has been matched up with their perfect match prior to the season starting by professional matchmakers, right? If the cast can successfully figure out by the end of the season all of their perfect matches, they collectively win $1 million! But because the matches are set ahead of time, this often leads to people forming connections and having to abandon them at a moment's notice upon confirmation that they are not actually a match, which can usually be confirmed in the truth booth, which is like a little hut they can be voted into so the group can get answers, or like by deduction at the weekly matching ceremony where they find out how many matches they have but not who they are. It's all like super convoluted, and the goal is less to find love and more to find the person who's supposedly your perfect match. Sidebar, this premise pisses me off so much. This is Editing Nika here to say that I proceeded to go on a 10-minute rant about the premise of the show, which was just totally irrelevant, so sorry about that. We're gonna move on. But I digress. When it comes to drinking, there's a lot of it. Most nights the contestants get pretty blasted, and this leads to most of the drama in the show, as it usually results in people fighting or getting frisky, and oh my god, these guys love to fuck. Okay, I know I'm gonna need the whiteboard for this next section because there are a lot of names. While a lot of folks on this show drink a decent amount, there are some who overindulge quite a lot and end up getting super messy. So first, there's Noor, right? I'm gonna have to rotate this, aren't I? So Noor is pretty aggressive and possessive when sober, but downright dangerous when drunk. So Noor is matched with Amber. She finds out that her current match, Amber, has won a date with somebody else, and their girl is Paige. So Amber has a date with Paige, and Noor gets super mad, and she starts berating Paige and calling her mean names, and she's putting all this pressure on Amber to remain loyal to her. And Amber has actually a really good date, but she generally kind of refuses to do anything more than receive a kiss on the cheek because she doesn't want to hurt Noor's feelings. Meanwhile, back at the villa, Noor is smashed. Noor is so drunk, and she ends up making out with somebody else while Amber is away. I didn't write down who somebody else is, but I'm hoping that maybe Editing Nika will just put it right here. I don't know if I know how to do that. So Noor makes out with this other girl, while Amber's away. And then when she tells Amber about it, Amber's like, okay, I need some space to think about this. And Nora's like wandering the house, drunkenly calling after her. She's super out of it. She's sitting on the steps crying. It's just, watching it, I was like, this girl is blackout drunk. Those two obviously don't make it, but it kind of introduces us to Nora's like drunken outbursts and sets a precedent. So obviously Nora and Amber don't work out, right? However, now we can introduce Kai, who is going to be a central player. Basically, Kai is seeing both Jasmine and Nor, and everyone knows about it, but not everyone's happy about it. Nor and Kai get into a near physical altercation where they have to be, like, forcibly removed by security because Nor is feeling jealous of, like, Kai and Jasmine's public displays of affection. That being said, Kai has recently expressed to both of them that he intends to continue seeing both of them, and Nor like was really upset by this and just went and got like super drunk. And then Kai and Jasmine went to the other room and just started like hooking up. That's what leads to like Nor basically bursts into the room and like starts like yelling at them. You honestly. After she hears somebody else mention that they're in the room hooking up, initially she doesn't really notice because she's super drunk. And the next night she ends up like getting into this altercation with Jasmine over it because she tries to talk to Kai about it and he's not interested in having this conversation. It's a whole thing. Kai even mentions to Jasmine at some point that he's getting turned off by Nora's excessive drinking and actually asks Nora on one occasion to like not drink so much, to which she just drinks even more to piss him off. So the whole situation is just really unhealthy and really not good. Kai is actually the center of attention for like the first half of this season. He's initially like super head over heels for Jenna, another contestant on the show. Then he also just kind of hooks up with whoever's around when he's drunk. He does mention early on that he's newly on testosterone, which is known to increase libido like crazy. It's like a second puberty. So the influence of alcohol is a little harder to speak on here. But there is a scene where he is secretly hooking up with Jenna after they've been told like they're not a match and everyone in the house is like stop hooking up. And then like 3 girls enter the room to stop them from hooking up. But then they're like, ooh, this is kind of spicy. And they just end up having a fivesome.
So Jasmine, Kylie, and I were just like, who the is in the boom boom room? And then we all walk in there and it was just kind of hot. You know? So we all just kind of...
And like whenever incidents like that happen, the next morning there's always this like conversation along the lines of an apology, and it's usually like, it didn't mean anything, I was just drunk. I just think that's interesting to note that often people are in these scenarios where they do stuff that they don't stand by the next day because of how much they're drinking. Thankfully, even when the drunken antics do get a bit out of hand, there is generally a common understanding of consent on this season. There is like mention of regrets from contestants, but no allegations of foul play. This is unfortunately not always the case. The next section of this video, in fact, until the end of the video, just assume that everything I say is alleged. I will say allegedly a lot of times. I don't want to be sued, okay? Allegedly. Everything is alleged. A couple of years ago, season 5, Are You the One contestant, Gianna Hammer, came out with her story on TikTok. She tells the story in full, and as of filming this, it's still available online. I don't feel particularly comfortable telling it on her behalf, and I don't have permission to share the clips in this video. So if you would like to hear about what happens in depth, I have the first part linked below, and I would recommend going to watch it. What you need to know for the time being is that this time that when she was on the show, she was taking meds that are not supposed to be taken with alcohol or mixed with alcohol. There was an incident in which she alleges that she was given these meds by producers while drunk, and she blacked out. The next day she was informed that another contestant had tried to take advantage of her under the circumstances. It's really quite fucked up, and I recommend watching her retelling of the experience as well as the aftermath and how it was dealt with. I wish I could say that this was an isolated anomaly, but unfortunately I can think of 2 other instances like it off the top of my head. Specifically, allegations from reality TV shows where contestants are monitored damn near all the time. Below Deck crew member Samantha Suarez came forward in August of this year, 2023, with allegations against cast member Gary King, who was said to have forced himself on her in his room while intoxicated and in his underwear until she physically forced him off of her. Other crew members anonymously referred to him as next level scary with women. A recent claim has been made against Love is Blind production companies by a contestant who was completely scrubbed from their most recent season, season 5. She alleges that her on-screen fiance assaulted her during the honeymoon section of the show, and she believes that the acts were likely filmed as the contestants are under near constant surveillance. All of the claims I've mentioned have been either outright denied or sort of brushed under the carpet in the name of like serious investigation into alleged crimes, yada yada corporate jargon, and these are just really upsetting scenarios. Before anyone gets the urge to say not all men, let's dig into how alcohol affects sexual violence a little bit more.
Obviously, when you said, you know, everyone hates you in here, you meant to fuck off.
I hate you.
You meant to
no one
fuck
likes you.
No one likes me.
Slingerland has a section in his book called Beer Goggles and Violence Against Women. It was both very enlightening and extremely grim. We've already discussed inflated attraction effects of alcohol, but that has a bit of a domino effect when it comes to sex, and specifically consent. The studies on how men behave in regards to sexual desire are extremely telling, and these are findings that stood out to me specifically. Studies have demonstrated that heterosexual men are more likely to misread female behaviors as sexually suggestive. One recent study also showed that alcohol flips men into more objectifying stance towards women comparing to sober controls, and so this causes them to focus more on women's bodies than their faces. Men in one study showed reduced ability to distinguish between generic friendliness and sexual interest while remaining capable of accurately processing other relevant cues, such as how provocatively the women were dressed. And my least favorite one, a probably related and particularly disturbing finding, comes from studies where men are showed pornographic clips depicting fictionally either consensual sex or rape, and have their physiological arousal measured. Sober male subjects are more aroused by portrayals of consensual sex, whereas intoxicated men are aroused by both. So that's upsetting. Let's talk about stats and facts. I'm going to read this part because there's a lot of numbers and I want to get it right. The self-reported readiness of men to behave in ways that would constitute rape also increases with blood alcohol content. When sexual assault occurs, it is very common to find alcohol in the mix. Studies of convicted rapists find that anywhere from 40 to 63% were intoxicated when they offended. Heavy use of alcohol also plays a central and odious role in sexual assault on college campuses and in wider world is predictive of partner abuse. It is almost certainly the case that throwing large groups of already prefrontally challenged young people into house or frat parties with music, dancing, and massive quantities of distilled liquor served in opaque red plastic cups is a recipe for trouble. Either Bless you. Analyses of police records find that in up to 72% of cases of sexual assault, either the offender, the victim, or both were drunk. That's a lot of info, so I'm going to give you a moment to sit with it. I think it's interesting that Slingerland references frat parties with lots of young people, and music, and booze, and dancing, and opaque cups as being a very common site of sexual violence. And I don't think that too many people would be super surprised to hear that. So why are we surprised when an isolated house full of young people, free-flowing booze, music, dancing, and opaque cups produces the same result? I know this is absolutely 100% not the appropriate time, but have you gotten this far into the video without appreciating my metal cup? that I got specifically to shoot this video in honor of the stupid little metal cups that they use on the like Netflix reality dating shows. This just might be an opportunity to recognize that. Okay, I'm sorry. My point is, when you understand the danger that you're introducing with alcohol into an isolated space like these reality TV shows, especially in such a concentrated way, and with all the other effects of being on a show like this, we're kidding ourselves if we truly believe that the women, the people on these shows aren't at risk. The messy drama moments that we show up for and can't get enough of come at the risk of serious harm and violence. All because what? Drunk people are more interesting? Food for thought. Let's go back to Love Island for a second. Remember the clip you saw at the beginning of this video? When you first watched it, you probably connected the dots between the drinking and the like fiery behavior. It's not uncommon for people to get erratic and confrontational when drinking. I remember being like a bit uncomfortable, but based on everything I knew about these people so far, I thought the risk of actual physical violence was pretty low. Now that I understand a little bit more of how alcohol affects the psyche, I'm reconsidering. We've discussed the risk of sexual violence, but did you know that alcohol is the only drug besides pure stimulants like meth that is known to increase physical aggression and violence? It totally is. It's known to induce aggressive and violent behavior, especially in people with low levels of cognitive control. David G. Mandelbaum's 1965 work, Alcohol and Culture, cites Arthur P. McKinley when talking about the cross-cultural belief that alcohol in crowds are risky. They speak in reference to like sporting stadiums that ban alcohol, as it is considered dangerous to heighten the emotions of large numbers of people who gather at the same occasion. And the general consensus is that large groups of people plus booze equals big bad, very violent. So naturally the contestants of Love Island are like a perfect case study for this, as a large group with strong emotions who have also been drinking. There's more to it though, like that specific moment that I showed you, because so far I've only talked to you guys about like isolated incidents and a bunch of like science and anthropology stuff, but that's just kind of background noise when you have added context of the individuals at the heart of this. In this next section, we're going to talk specifically about the contestants, and mainly about the ones who stood out to me as like true victims of the reality dating system and its misuse of alcohol. Hey, it's Editing Nika again. This video is already 30 minutes long, and I am about halfway through. So it's gonna be 2 parts, surprise! Oh my god, that's exciting, cool. So yeah, come back for part 2 whenever I finish editing it. I don't know, man. Okay, sick, thanks for watching. We'll talk about all the fun reality dating stuff in the next part. It's gonna be like about how like they produce people and how you know, the specific storylines between the different characters. It's gonna get into some of the people who have taken their lives since the show, and just sort of the lack of aftercare for the contestants, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So, you know, come back and watch the second part, because it's too long, okay? It's too long. I'm sorry. I have to go to sleep. Goodbye. Bye. Good night.